Russia unleashed its largest and most coordinated aerial assault on Ukraine in over a year, marking a grim escalation in the ongoing conflict. The attack began before sunrise, catching many residents off guard as the first missiles streaked across the sky, their thunderous impacts echoing through the city streets. Air raid sirens blared relentlessly across Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa, piercing the early morning silence. Explosions shattered the calm, sending shockwaves through neighborhoods and forcing families to scramble for shelter. The sudden violence transformed peaceful cityscapes into scenes of chaos and fear. The world watched in shock and disbelief as thick black smoke billowed above the iconic skylines. The golden domes of Kyiv's cathedral stood silhouetted against a backdrop of destruction, while panicked crowds gathered in the streets, staring at the distant infernos. But this time, Ukrainians responded with defiance, not fear. Instead of succumbing to panic, they stood their ground, helping neighbors and strangers alike. The spirit of unity was palpable, as people formed human chains to clear debris and check on the wounded. Rather than hiding, many residents took to the streets, documenting the chaos with their smartphones. They gathered emergency supplies, shared information, and braced themselves for what might come next. The sense of community grew stronger in the face of adversity, as civilians recorded the unfolding crisis and prepared for retaliation. The attack was a brutal message from Moscow, a show of force meant to intimidate. But Ukraine was ready to answer. Military vehicles rolled through the streets, air defense systems were activated, and soldiers worked through the dawn, determined to protect their homeland. International leaders quickly condemned the strikes, issuing statements of support and solidarity. But for many Ukrainians, words were not enough. They demanded concrete action, more aid, and stronger measures to deter further aggression. The assault targeted not just infrastructure, bridges, power lines, and homes, but the very spirit of a nation that refused to break. Streets were littered with debris, yet people pressed on, determined to rebuild and resist. As first responders rushed into danger, the true scale of the attack became clear. It was a multi-pronged assault, designed to overwhelm emergency services and terrorize civilians. Firefighters battled blazes, ambulances navigated rubble-strewn roads, and paramedics worked tirelessly to save lives. Yet, rather than break Ukraine's will, the attack only galvanized it. Crowds gathered in solidarity, volunteers distributed aid in bomb shelters, and Ukrainian flags were raised high, symbols of hope and resistance amid the chaos. Fear quickly turned to anger, and anger to resolve. People consoled one another, then stood up and moved forward, united in their determination to recover and fight back. Together, they began the difficult work of cleaning up and rebuilding, refusing to let terror define their future. The morning of October 5th was dark and filled with uncertainty, but it set the stage for a dramatic response. Emergency lights flickered across the city as first responders surveyed the destruction, and the resolve of the people shone brighter than the fires that lit the streets. Ukraine's resilience was about to be tested and proven once again. Communities came together to repair shattered windows, organize relief efforts, and support those most affected. In every damaged neighborhood, scenes of courage and solidarity emerged. The Kremlin's strategy to break Ukraine's spirit had backfired. Instead of sowing fear and division, the attack united the country and drew even greater international attention to their struggle. The world watched as the story unfolded, with news anchors reporting live and headlines dominating the global conversation. The resilience of Ukraine became a symbol of hope for many, inspiring support from around the world. The next move would be Ukraine's. As dawn broke, military convoys rolled out. Soldiers prepared for a counterattack, and President Zelensky addressed the nation, vowing that Ukraine would not only endure, but fight back with renewed strength and unity. In the tense aftermath of the latest attacks, President Zelensky addressed the nation with a steely resolve that resonated far beyond Ukraine's borders. His words were measured, but his determination was unmistakable, a leader standing firm in the face of relentless aggression. He promised his people and the world, "For every missile that strikes our cities, for every life lost to senseless violence, there will be a payback. No act of terror would go unanswered." The message was not just for Ukrainians, but for those watching in Moscow and across the globe. This was not a plea for mercy or a call for sympathy. It was a direct warning to the Kremlin. The era of passive defense was over. Ukraine was no longer confined to simply defending its borders. The rules of engagement had fundamentally changed. The military, once focused on holding the line, was now preparing to take the fight to the enemy. Zelensky's message was crystal clear. The war would no longer be fought only on Ukrainian soil. The aggressor would feel the consequences of their actions, and the cost of invasion would be brought home to them. Speaking directly to his fellow Ukrainians, Zelensky ignited a powerful spirit of resistance. He assured them that the military was not only ready, but determined to protect every inch of their homeland. The people rallied behind him, united in purpose and hope. To the world, Zelensky called the attack what it truly was: state-sponsored terror. He urged global leaders to recognize the gravity of the situation and to stand with Ukraine against this blatant aggression. To Russia, his warning was even more direct. He promised targeted, precise retaliation against the infrastructure fueling their war machine. No longer would the Kremlin act with impunity. The Kremlin may have dismissed his words as mere bravado, but Ukraine's proven track record of military innovation and resilience suggested otherwise. Their ability to adapt and strike back had already surprised the world. This was the public declaration of a new phase in the conflict, one where Ukraine would not hesitate to strike deep inside Russian territory, targeting the very heart of the war effort. The world watched with bated breath, bracing for Ukraine's next move. International leaders convened emergency meetings, and global media outlets covered every development, aware that the stakes had never been higher. Zelensky's warning was not a bluff. His confidence was rooted in the strength and unity of his people, and in the capabilities of a military that had already defied expectations. Across the country, Ukrainian forces mobilized with renewed determination. Military equipment was deployed, strategies refined, and every soldier understood the importance of the moment. Ukraine was ready to change the course of the war. The countdown had begun, and the world would soon witness the resolve of a nation unwilling to back down. Russia's October 5th assault was massive and calculated. Over 90 missiles and 60 drones struck in waves, aiming to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses. Major cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, and even Lviv were hit, targeting both infrastructure and residential areas. Russia used a mix of cruise and ballistic missiles from land, sea, and air, trying to confuse defenders. Despite the intensity, Ukraine's air defenses intercepted many threats, but some missiles broke through. The Kremlin hoped to break Ukraine's morale and create a new crisis, but underestimated Ukrainian resilience. This onslaught was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. The true cost of the attack was measured in shattered lives: at least 18 killed, over 100 injured, families destroyed in their sleep, markets turned to chaos, power outages left over 1 million without electricity, water, or heat as autumn's chill set in. Hospitals struggled on backup generators, treating waves of wounded. Ordinary people bore the brunt, children forced into basements, elders weeping over lost homes. The attacks were meant to terrorize, but instead, they united communities. Volunteers cleared debris, shared food, and lined up to donate blood. The Kremlin's strategy of terror only strengthened Ukrainian resolve. Even in darkness, the spirit of Ukraine shone through. The attack brought people together, not to surrender, but to resist. Ukraine's retaliation was swift and unprecedented. Within 24 hours, waves of Ukrainian drones and new long-range missiles struck deep inside Russia. This was no symbolic gesture, it was a coordinated operation targeting military airfields, command centers, and energy infrastructure. For the first time, ordinary Russians felt the war in their own cities. Ukraine's new Trident missiles hit high-value targets hundreds of kilometers away, crippling Russia's war machine. The doctrine had changed. Ukraine was now proactively degrading the enemy's ability to attack. The world watched as Ukraine rewrote the rules of modern warfare. The days of a one-sided war were over. Ukraine's counterstrike sent shockwaves through Russia. In Belgorod, drone attacks caused citywide blackouts, shattering the illusion of safety. Rostov-on-Don's oil depot burned for days, and a refinery in Samara was crippled, disrupting fuel supplies and spiking prices. The economic and psychological impact was immediate. War was no longer distant for Russians. Social media filled with panic and confusion as the Kremlin's narrative unraveled. Some demanded escalation, others questioned the war itself. The sense of security was gone. The Kremlin tried to downplay the damage, but the truth was visible in the blackouts and flames. Official outrage couldn't mask the reality. These strikes were direct responses to attacks on Ukraine. The blackout in Belgorod became a symbol: the war had come home. Russia's population now faced the consequences of their government's aggression. The cost of war was no longer abstract. The conflict had crossed the border. On both sides of the conflict, the aftermath was raw, immediate, and deeply personal. The devastation was not just seen, but felt in every shattered window and every trembling voice. For countless civilians, the world they knew had changed overnight, replaced by a new, harsh reality. In Kyiv, Olena described the devastation with tears in her eyes. We heard the whistle, then everything shook. The ground trembled beneath us, and in an instant, our lives were turned upside down. Our neighbor's home was just gone. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of distant sirens and the cries of those searching for loved ones. In Belgorod, Alexei filmed the drone attack before the blackout. We've seen war on TV, but this is real fear. The explosions were so close, the windows rattled, and suddenly, the lights went out. We were left in darkness, not knowing what would come next. "We don't know if we're safe anymore," he whispered, his voice shaking. Families huddled together in basements, clinging to hope as the world above them changed forever. In Kharkiv, rescuers worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from the rubble, risking their own lives to save others. Each life saved was a small victory amid overwhelming loss. In Rostov, firefighters battled infernos that lit up the night sky, their faces illuminated by the flames as they fought to protect what little remained. These images, smoke, sirens, shattered glass, told a universal story of loss and resilience. The chaos was everywhere, but so was the determination to endure. Ukrainian eyewitnesses spoke with unwavering determination to rebuild and resist. Volunteers cleared debris, patched up homes, and waved their flags as symbols of hope and defiance. Across the border, Russians faced confusion and a dawning sense of vulnerability. Many watched the news in disbelief, struggling to reconcile official reports with the destruction outside their windows. Propaganda was no match for the reality outside their windows. The truth was written in broken glass and empty streets, in the faces of neighbors who had lost everything. The voices from the rubble were a stark reminder: in war, it is ordinary people who bear the greatest cost. Their pain, their courage, and their resilience became the true story of this conflict. The contrast was clear. Ukrainians focused on survival and resistance, coming together to help one another, to share food, shelter, and hope. Russians, meanwhile, faced growing fear and uncertainty, lining up for supplies and searching for answers in a world that suddenly felt unstable and unpredictable. The human toll was undeniable. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, families mourned their losses, and the scars, both physical and emotional, would last for generations. The war's reality could no longer be ignored. Suffering had no borders, and in the end, it was the shared humanity of ordinary people, on both sides, that stood as the most powerful testament to the true cost of conflict. Ukraine's Trident missile system changed the war's dynamics overnight. No longer reliant on Western-supplied long-range weapons, Ukraine could now strike deep into Russia. With a range over 700 kilometers, Trident put key Russian military and industrial sites at risk. Russia now faced a dilemma: protect its cities or its invading army. The illusion of a low-risk war for Russia was shattered. Trident became both a weapon and a deterrent, signaling that future attacks on Ukraine would have painful consequences. Ukraine's ingenuity sent a message to allies: with support, it could shift the balance of power. After the strikes, Zelensky addressed the world, not with triumph, but resolve. "We do not target homes or schools. We target the infrastructure of war," he said. Ukraine's actions were self-defense, not aggression. The message was for Ukrainians, Russians, and the world. Ukraine's fight is with the war machine, not civilians. Zelensky framed the strikes as necessary to stop terror and bring justice. The only path to peace, he argued, was for Russia to end its aggression. Ukraine's new capabilities aim to raise the cost of war for Russia's elite and military. The goal remained liberation and sovereignty, not revenge, but victory. Ukraine called for more support, more air defenses, and the freedom to fight on its own terms. The world was urged to stand with Ukraine until a just and lasting peace was achieved.